Hey everyone! So about a month ago now, or just over, I announced this exciting new project I was working on at the end of a very long video called the Fresh Poets Society. Basically, each month I am going to give you guys a prompt, which could be a word, a picture, a piece of music. Who knows what it's going to be? We're going to try all kinds of fun stuff. And based on that prompt, you guys are going to go away and either find an original poem that you've written in the past or write a new one for the month and submit it. And then I'm going to pick a few out and talk about them in a video, and I wanted to try and find a way for us all to discuss the poems together and kind of work on creating a community where we could all help each other and kind of constructively critique each other's work and talk about what we like and what we'd improve and that kind of thing. So I thought I'd get maybe like 10 or 20 entries or something like that, but you guys sent me over 150 poems. It's amazing. I'm shocked, but I'm happy, and I read them all, and I'm so impressed with you guys. You're seriously amazing. I wish I could put them all in this video and talk about them all, but then I wouldn't be making any other kind of video for the next 6 months, let's be honest. So I've had to pick out a couple that I want to talk about in detail, and then a couple that I'm just going to read out and that I think would be worth discussing. The fact that this has been so popular and I received so many submissions has made me realise that I'm going to change the way that I accept submissions, so stick around to the end of the video to hear how I'm going to be doing that, how you can submit for next month, and also what next month's prompt is. I know a few of you have already sneakily seen it because you're smart people, and there's already a couple of entries, but stick around and I'll be talking about it then. So unsurprisingly, with everything everyone's been going through, last month's theme was isolation, and I wanted you guys to tell me what that meant to you. How have you been coping with isolation and quarantine? How do you feel isolated in your day-to-day life? Do you like being isolated, or is isolation a lonely thing? Just, you could have been very literal with the prompt, or you could have been very abstract. I didn't mind. I just wanted to know, what does isolation make you think of? And the first poem that I want to talk about in a little bit of detail is called Dancing with Ed by Diana Kildoyle. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's about her experience with an eating disorder and how it made her feel isolated from everyone around her. A few of you might know this, but I've definitely had my own issues with food in the past, and that was one of the reasons I was drawn to this poem and really wanted to talk about it. When I was kind of at my lowest points in terms of depression and anxiety, basically it first started with me just not feeling like eating and not being able to eat and not necessarily being able to get up and make food and that kind of thing. And then after a while, as my anxiety got worse, controlling my food intake became the only thing I felt I was actually able to control in my life. And yeah, it was a lot for me. I don't want to get into too much detail on that for now, but the point is, this is a poem that I really connected with and could relate to, and it's actually very similar to a poem that I did a first draft of a couple of years back, but much better than anything I did back then. So it's something that I just love and want to share with you guys, and I do have a few thoughts about it and how I would like to see Diana maybe improve it and work on it and grow it a bit more, and that's why we're going to be talking about it. So throughout this poem, she uses this fantastic allegory of dancing with a man to explain how she feels that the eating disorder kind of controls her life, so bear that in mind as you're listening to this. Dancing with Ed. Kissed his chapped lips, a heart cold as ice. I tasted his tongue that spoke only lies. I felt his neck as I turned away from his face. He grabbed my hands and said to follow his ways. His pale skin was like a phantom, haunting my soul. He gave me my meal, yet there was nothing in the bowl. I took his shoulders, he took my sides, and we danced under the crescent moon. He smiled to my tears and said, "Baby, you will make it soon." We kept dancing the entire night, till my arms just one day let go. He took the rhythm in my heart. I asked to stop, but he said no. Dance in the moonlight, baby, till your body's frail and weak. When you finish this dance, you'll be perfect. Just think of it as one more week. So she danced and danced, with sweats pouring down like a shower. She saw pretty lights, and each word doubled, that read a poem of her sorrow. In the end, she fell right down, as nothing but skin and bone, and she smiled to herself and said, "Now I'm perfect." And then he left her to die alone. So I really love the imagery in this poem. The chapped lips, the pale skin like a phantom, it's definitely foreshadowing for how the narrator is going to end up. Ed is the personification of her eating disorder, and I think that's fantastic. and it's a great place to take this poem and work with it, and there's a hell of a lot she can do with it there. I think in terms of improving, what I'd really like to see is a little development of her feelings towards him and how they change throughout the poem and develop over time, you know? So the opening stanza where she describes his lips as chapped and tongue as speaking lies, it's great, it's accurate for what an eating disorder is, but it does lead me to ask, if he's so unappealing, then why is she dancing with him in the first place? What I'd really like to see is her kind of enamoured by him at first. You know, maybe at first she finds him intriguing, beautiful. He showers her with promises and whispering, you know, romantic words in her ear, but also, you know, he is negging her. At first, you know, she thinks that his pale skin, you know, it's as beautiful as ivory, but as time goes on, she discovers it's not at all, and, you know, it's actually cold and pale and like a phantom, as she writes. So we see this kind of development and not necessarily growth of her feelings, but almost like decline of her feelings over time. You know, the bit about how she tasted his tongue, maybe she can talk about how she did that and is intrigued at first, hungering for more, but then by the end of the poem she ends up choking on his lies, something like that instead. So you get that development. I'd like a little more food-related imagery as well. I think that would work really, really well in this poem to like tie it all together. You know, her body isn't just frail and weak, but maybe it's like as frail and weak as an eggshell, or I can't think what other food is weak. I don't know. Or maybe like his skin isn't just pale like a phantom, but it's pale and cold like a bowl of porridge left out for a week. You know, it's all kind of lumpy and congeal. Gross, I know, but that's kind of the imagery. You know, it should be gross. You know, maybe his lips tasted like cherry at first, but now his breath reeks of rotting fruit, something like that. Again, it shows the growth, the development, but you've got that food imagery tying it all together. And it also kind of would show her obsession with food, how she kind of can't think of anything else because this eating disorder is controlling her life and taking over everything. I love the part of the narrative that focuses on them dancing. I think that's really, really great because, you know, men traditionally lead in a dance, and it's very symbolic of her essentially giving up control to him because she thinks it's going to be fun, it's going to be worth it, it's the thing you have to do. And that is definitely a statement, I think, on, you know, her essentially submitting to the eating disorder at first because she thinks, you know, that if it's about thinness and stuff like that, then it's the thing to do. It's the infinite thing. It's expected. Yeah, I think it's great. I don't like the change from first to third person. I think it would be better if it was all in first person, but that might just be a personal choice. So you guys let me know what you think of that. That said, I think other than the third person, first person thing, the last stanza is perfect. It's simple, but it's brutal, as it should be, and I love that. I would not change that at all. I think it's great, other than the personage, you know what I'm trying to say, words. And I also like the rhyme scheme throughout this poem. It doesn't feel forced or cliched, but it works. The shower sorrow half rhyme maybe needs a little bit of work, but maybe that's just my like slightly northern accent messing up how it's pronounced a bit. That said, though, I think the rest of the rhyme in the poem, it makes it flow. It's very cleverly done. I wouldn't mind, though, if Diana played with the structure of this poem a little bit more and kind of went a little bit kind of more out there. You know how often with eating disorders, you start off being very controlled, very, you know, sticking to the rules. But then as you go on, it gets more and more out of control. And you keep trying to like grasp back at the control and you can't because ultimately the eating disorder is taking over. You think you're controlling it, but you're not. By the end of it, it's controlling you. I'd like to see that reflected in the structure of the poem. So maybe something like a very strict, deliberate rhyme scheme at the beginning, you know, set syllables in each line, a set number of lines, you know, very structured. And then maybe by the end of it, it kind of gets messy and there's no real rhyme, or there's half rhymes here and there, and there's internal rhymes, and things are kind of a bit all over the place. There's some long lines, there's some short lines. All the stanzas are different lengths by the end. I'd like to see a little bit more chaos. Again, you see this like, not exactly, not growth, but you see it devolve as the poem goes on, you know, that's what I'd like to see. I don't know, maybe it's just something you can play with. And on one final note about this poem, I would like to see the feelings of isolation just pushed a little further and kind of brought to the forefront of this poem a bit. Maybe you could change the setting of the poem, so they're not just dancing under the moonlight somewhere, but maybe they're in a ballroom and it starts and, you know, she's surrounded by family and friends and she sees him and they're dancing together and she's enamored by him, and by the end of it her family and friends all kind of fade away and she finds herself being carried away from them by this man who's sweeping her around the ballroom but also away from everyone she knows and loves, and in the end it's only her and the man left alone and no one's around to help. And she doesn't necessarily realise they're fading, but when she looks around, they're gone. So maybe you could play with that. I don't know. These are just some ideas. That's enough for now. I did love the poem, though, and I think it's fantastic, and it's an amazing start. And I want to read more like this, absolutely. But they are just my thoughts. I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this poem and all the other ones that I'm going to be talking about in this video down in the comments below. Of course, remember, keep it constructive, keep it nice, don't be rude, no comments about eating disorders that are gross or inappropriate. It is a struggle for not only this poet, not only myself, but a hell of a lot of people. So keep everything respectful and nice. This is all about helping people grow and improve and not being mean. Next up, I want to talk about a poem that was actually submitted by a friend of mine. She's a wonderful musician called Cerian. I've spoken about her a little bit before, and I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about a poem submitted by my friend because, you know, I didn't want it to seem like I was picking favourites, but I ended up really, really loving what she'd done and having a hell of a lot to say about it, so I was like, why not? It was one of the last entries that I actually received for this month, and it kind of hit me straight away because, again, it was one that I could relate to so much. So I think Cerian actually plans to record this as a song, which is why you'll see a lot of repetitions and kind of like a chorus throughout it. So think of this more as lyrics than a poem, but we'll talk about that after I've read it. It's called Wrong Side, and if it's okay, I'm going to let her describe what it's about because she sent me this great little thing in an email saying, I started writing during lockdown about the isolation felt in the early hours of the morning when I'm supposed to be asleep, but feel like I'm the only one in the world who's still awake. My nocturnal habits have got so much worse during lockdown, so here I am going to sleep at 7 a.m, and I really do see the sunrise and hear the birds singing every morning from the wrong side of it. And that and the poem itself just kind of hit me because I've been there and I relate to it, a lot. Not so much now because I kind of have Kyrouac to keep me on a regular human schedule-ish, but especially in my kind of second and third years of uni and when I was living in Oxford and stuff, and my issues with things like depression were at their worst, I definitely felt like this. My sleep schedule was all over the place, especially when I was at uni for a while. I basically, you could say I was nocturnal, but worse than that, I didn't have a 24-hour day. I had a weird 40-hour day that kind of split things up weird. So I'd be awake for 30 hours and then sleep for 10, 12 hours, something like that. And then be awake for another 30 hours and then sleep for another 10 or 12 hours. And it was a mess. I wasn't working on anyone else's schedule, and it did make me feel messed up and alone and very, very isolated. I simply, my head was so loud and so messy and so foggy that I just simply couldn't get to sleep until I was physically exhausted enough that I would near enough pass out, when I couldn't stay awake anymore. And I did feel incredibly isolated from everyone around me because I couldn't go to lectures properly, and when I could, I was foggy and in my head and not really with it. I'd sometimes be sleeping during the day and awake during night, or sometimes I'd wake up and go and meet my friends in the pub in the evening, but I didn't exactly want to drink with them because that was breakfast for me. I'd only woken up an hour ago and no one wants to drink a cider at breakfast, I'd bump into people at the bus stop and they'd be coming in to go to lectures and I'd be going home after spending 24 hours straight in the library. And you really do see things differently when you're kind of living to this completely different schedule to everyone else. And you do feel incredibly isolated, Sunrises, sunsets, the world, nature, you feel on the wrong side from everything. You feel isolated from everyone, and that's what I think Cerian does a great job of capturing in these lyrics, and that's why I wanted to talk about this one. So let's read it. Although I wish she was here to sing it for us, because Cerian has like the voice of an angel. I'm not even joking. Go listen to her music. I'll link it down below. I stretch the night into day. It's a backwards way to live, they say. I stretch the hours beside, but it won't turn the tide of time away. And a choir of birds are singing songs. They say you don't belong. And the morning bells are ringing, singing time goes on. And the world will turn without me. I'll be late to say goodbye. If you ever saw the wrong side, did you stop to wonder why? I'm on the wrong side of the morning and the wrong side of the night. Now the light side is dawning, and I'll be left because I couldn't be right. Here in no man's land there are no plans, but it doesn't last. No one to hold my hand as I watch the sands of time slip past. And a choir of birds are singing songs that say you don't belong, and the morning bells are ringing, singing time goes on. And the world will turn without me. I'll be late to say goodbye. If I ever saw the wrong side, did you stop to wonder why? I'm on the wrong side of the morning and the wrong side of the night, and now the light is dawning. I'll be left because I couldn't be right. The birds are singing like a symphony for an audience of one. I know I'm meant to be asleep, for yesterday is gone. The birds are singing like a symphony for an audience of one. I know it isn't meant for me. Now a new day has begun. I'm on the wrong side of the morning and the wrong side of the night, and now the light is dawning, and I'm left because I couldn't be right. But the wrong side of the morning is the bright side of the night, when you stayed awake through silence to stop and wonder why. So it's a song. Brilliant, beautiful, it works. I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about songwriting, because I don't. But I love the repeated images of the birds singing. I think it's beautiful. You know, there's almost a juxtaposition there with the images of a choir of birds are singing songs that say you don't belong. Because in my mind, when you think of a choir, you think about belonging. You think about being part of a group, finding your place, using your voice as one small part of something bigger and greater. And yet here, the choir is reminding her that she's not a part of the group, that she doesn't belong. It's the complete opposite, which I think is amazing and beautiful and kind of jarring, as it should be. It's the same with the later line about the birds are singing like a symphony for an audience of one. Again, with a symphony, you're playing as one small part of a bigger orchestra. You belong. But not only that, you know, I think it's worth noting that usually you'd hear a symphony in maybe like a big stadium or theatre or whatever, like an auditorium, that's probably the word I'm looking for, you know, as part of an audience. You're just one of many listening to this beautiful symphony. And yet here, she's an audience of one. And again, shows the feelings of isolation, shows she doesn't quite feel part of the real world. She feels separate from it. And I think that's done very, very well. I think it's fantastic. As a song, I think this works and it's enough, and you don't really want to overcomplicate it. But if this was a poem I was reading in a book, I think I'd like a little more to kind of mull over and dive into. I'd like a little more in depth. In particular, I'd like to see a little more exploration of some of the morning images. So we currently have stuff like the choir of birds, the morning bells ringing, and I can completely understand why Cerian, as a musician, has focused on the things she can hear, because that's kind of who she is. It's all about the sound, the music of the world of life, you know. But I'd like to see something here appeal a little more to the other senses, you know. Maybe this is just me because I'm quite a visual person, but I want to know what else she can see. I want to know what she can feel, what she can smell. What else is happening in the morning that makes her feel apart from everything? What does the morning air feel like? What is it like to take a deep breath of it? Is it quite humid? Is it cold? What else can you see? You know, maybe a description of the sky turning from, you know, black as ink to baby blue, because, you know, having spoken to Cerian about this stuff, she's always told me how she feels quite creative at night, and I get exactly the same way. You know, there's that time when everyone else is asleep and suddenly you're hit with this like burst of inspirational creativity and you just want to write or paint or make or do something. And the night definitely sparks your creativity, which is where I was thinking, you know, maybe like the night sky being like black as ink, representing the creativity, but with the morning, you know, it turns to baby blue kind of representing innocence and a new beginning and stuff like that. And maybe if she could write it in a way that suggests that the sky is like fading from inky black to baby blue, maybe that's gonna show, you know, what should be a new beginning and new possibilities actually feels more like a loss and, you know, closure where you might not be ready for it, and, you know, bring it back to those feelings of like being on the wrong side. I don't know. This is just kind of thoughts. I have notes, not fully developed ideas here. I'd also like a little more focus on the birds. And maybe I'm focusing in on this because I've been reading so much Oscar Wilde recently, and you all know my favourite short story of his is The Nightingale and the Rose, and we spoke a lot about flower meanings in that. We also spoke a little bit about bird meanings. I did a video on it, that's what I'm referring to, sorry. And so with this in mind, I'd like to see a little more focus in this on the birds, and maybe what kind of birds they are and when they're singing and why. Are there also birds singing at night? And if so, are they a different kind of bird? Is it a different song? Does that song make you feel included, where the morning birds make you feel excluded? A little bit more of an explanation there. Let's take a little bit of a look at birds and kind of their meaning in literature and mythology and stuff like that. So usually the first birds to sing in any morning, like in actual nature, are birds like blackbirds, robins, wrens. Maybe it would be cool to contrast that to birds that sing last thing at night or during the night, so things like nightingales, warblers, song thrushes, things like that. And then maybe look into the specific bird meanings, right? So blackbirds are normally associated with knowledge, intuition, robins, symbols of good luck and patience, whereas, and they're like the morning birds, you know? Whereas nightingales are meant to represent poetry, creativity, kind of a muse, but they're also singing these kind of like sad laments and stuff like that. I don't know, maybe mentioning specific birds like that and slight references to their meanings and stuff could add a little bit more depth to the poem. It could, I don't know, could just add a little more. I think in general as well, I'd just like to see a few more examples of juxtaposing imagery, a little more contrast in there. We already have some great ones with night and day, dark and light, silence and music, left and right. But I'd also like to see more kind of unexpected comparisons that really drive home that feeling of being on the wrong side. You know, I'd like to see more of these contrasts, but I'd also just like to see the kind of wrong feeling being pushed a bit further, things just feeling a little off, you know. So maybe the morning is quiet, but it's too quiet. Maybe the choir of birds are singing, but they're singing off key. Maybe at night is when you really feel alive. You know, I love the line about, but the wrong side of the morning is the bright side of the night. And I'd love to see that kind of explored a little further and pushed a little further. And I don't know, just have a dive into it, you know. Anyway, I'm rambling again. They're just some ideas. I think as a song, like I say, as lyrics, it's wonderful, and it's definitely something I would listen to and relate to. And I know Cerian's going to do something beautiful with it in terms of melody and music and playing and everything. But if we're looking at it purely as a piece of poetry, yeah, there's a few more things I'd like to see, and that's just it. But again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This isn't just about me, this is about everyone giving feedback to everyone and creating a community of people who are working together and helping each other with poetry stuffs. Continuing on the nature theme, the last poem I want to talk about in depth is just a really short one. It's by Grayson Lucum, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's about someone or something being uprooted from their natural home, going to a new place and feeling trapped and isolated from everything they know and love, and how that reflects in their actions. It's a very short poem, but there's actually a hell of a lot of imagery and meaning in there, and I think it's very well done. It's not complicated, but it is complex. Here the wilted flower hangs her heavy head, weeping in the window, placed inside her cold new bed. She longs for the familiar music of birds and buzzing bees, but here she stays so silent, like a rooted willow tree. It's lovely. It's really, really nice. I love the consonants in some of these lines, you know. Here the wilted flower hangs her heavy head weeping in the window. The H's and the W's are beautiful. It creates this really strong rhythm. The poem just flows, almost like it's got a melody to it, you know. It's kind of like music. And then suddenly, contrasting with that second to last line about the flower's actions, she stays so silent. Again, you've got the alliteration in there, but it's kind of a lot more final. It's a lot calmer than the kind of melodic opening lines, you know. I love that contrast. I think it's excellent. The simile at the end is also really interesting to me. In her silence, she's rooted like a willow tree. And I find that very interesting. There's like a hell of a lot to unpack there, because she seems so weak and kind of fragile throughout. You know, she's wilted, weeping, longing for familiarity. And yet, in her silence, she resembles a willow tree. And now, willow trees are sometimes referred to as weeping willows, so you might think of them as quite sorrowful. Sorrowful's a word, right? Sad. We'll go with sad. But in literature and mythology and in the past, Willow trees have actually been thought to represent strength and stability and also flexibility. So maybe that is hinting that she's a lot stronger than she's letting on, and that she's actually coping a hell of a lot better than it might first appear. And I think that's very clever. I like it. You know, it kind of makes this poem and the end of it a little more ambiguous, and you don't quite know, does it have a happy ending? Is it not? And I kind of like that. It gives you a hell of a lot to think about and a hell of a lot you can take away from it, and kind of makes you think about your own actions and how you deal with isolation and new places and being taken away from things you know and things that are familiar. In terms of improvement, I would like to develop the bed imagery further and play on the concept of flower beds. So it talks about how she's placed inside her cold new bed, but I'd like a little more on that. You know, maybe she was ripped from her warm bed and now she's been placed in a cold terracotta cell, being like a flower pot or something like that. I'd like to see that developed a little more, and I'd like to see a little more contrast between her past location and the new one, maybe looking at like warmth and cold, friends and loneliness and so on. A little bit more contrast there, but without going too complicated. And I do worry that the birds and buzzing bees line is a little maybe cliched. I don't know. It feels like the one weak point of the poem, but otherwise I think it's near enough perfect and I love it, and I'm really, really impressed by it. I think it's wonderful. Now, because this video is getting very, very, very long, and I wish I could talk about more of these poems in depth like this, but there's just not enough time in the world. Instead, I just want to share a few more of the poems and submissions I got that I really enjoyed and that I think have a lot of discussion points in them. But I am going to leave the discussion of these ones open to you down in the comments. So please, please, please let me know your thoughts. First up, we have Red Thread, which makes allusions to the Fates in Greek mythology. So if you're not aware of this, I'm going to tell you a little bit of background before I read it, so you can kind of have an understanding of the poem. Basically, ancient Greek people believed that there were 3 goddesses called the Fates. They were kind of like sisters, and they were weavers, and they worked with threads and stuff like that. And basically, their job was to control the threads of life, which decided and directed everyone's destiny from birth. And that's referenced quite heavily in this poem. There's a tale I was told as a 13-year-old. 3 sisters bound by time. As one spun, another weaved, and the last was left to grieve. I felt a shiver down my spine. Isn't it funny, I thought, how the fates together wield all our threads in the face of forever, but will never be alone. Maybe my thread wasn't meant to be spun. I blew the candles off my cake yesterday, alone in my kitchen, lonelier than the gods, with my life in their hands. I didn't realize the knife was so sharp. The red thread around my little finger cut off clean. Atropos isn't laughing. It isn't her fault. It isn't mine either. And we damn well know we were bound to end up here as we stand face to face, merely a child in the face of a god. She smiles. Grief in the wrinkles at the corner of her eye. How old are you? I want to ask. How long have you been in pain? How many times have you tried and failed to meet your own thread with the blade in your hand? But there's no thread to be found, and there's no time left for me. How dreadful it is, I think, that my curse is death and yours is eternity. I realize I've been wrong. I used to envy you, I want to tell her, living a life in the company of 2 sisters. But is it a life if it doesn't have an end? Who is lonelier? Who has been blessed? The girl who lived and died, or death who can never truly rest? She nods. I see it in her eyes. I didn't say a word, but she nods. She has no time for lies. Funny, because she has all the time in the world. I don't. The thread falls on the ground without a sound. We were bound to end up here. Our next poem is about someone who's kind of scared to open up to anyone, and when she finally does let someone in, she still ends up alone. It's quite a sad one, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts. I've always been afraid of water, but you promised to keep me afloat. Seduced by your flawless surface reflecting the beauty of the world. Playful specks of green and gold glistening in the sunlight, inviting me in. Just dip your toes or take a sip. You begged of me to trust you, but I stayed on the shore. There, cold stones began to stab the naked soles of my feet. Scratches sore and deep, I could not leave. That night, as I slept, you crept closer, began to stroke my skin. Soft, gentle, I liked it. You slid, first between my toes, my legs, higher. In lazy dreams you sang to me, and slowly I sank deeper. In a sleepy haze I shivered, the sun not yet broken through. Underneath, colder than I expected. Wait. It gets better, you promised. So I lay in the chill, I waited. One by one the goosebumps faded, and you crept closer still. Entwined my fingers, hair, heart. Before I knew it, I was submerged, head over heels in you. I soared through glistening streams like starlight, but soon found inevitable murky depths. Isn't it wonderful, you whispered, to really let go, to trust? I tried to answer, but the water filled my lungs, flailing, kicking, which way is up and where is down? Somewhere around me, winds began to howl. Grey water spins me, black water beats me, thrown this way, that way. Unknown hands claw at my once pure flesh. Gasping, darkness, panic, lost, lost, lost. Then, I wake, tossed aside, discarded, in the mud and grime of the river's edge, alongside a shopping trolley with a wonky wheel, a single shoe, laces tangled, an old guitar with strings long snapped, a silver ring thrown in anger, and all your broken promises. In the distance you lay, still. Rainbows and rose petals dance along your skin. I turn to leave, but think I hear you call my name one last time. But no, not mine at all. Was it ever? Just dip your toes, you beg the new one, and I crawl home alone. Next up, Clash submitted this poem called Deafening Silence, which plays around with both the concept of sound and silence and the way different words sound in the poem's structure. This is definitely a poem to be read aloud, I think, the first verse in particular. So listen out for the rhymes and the rhythm and how the words play with each other. It's very good. It's called Deafening Silence. She had nothing to say, yet her silence spoke volumes. The words left unsaid lingered in the air, and the silence whispered secrets. The memories recorded in the walls, cracked with decay, shone upon her face with gentle disarray. Her silence spoke loudly, so loud it drowned out the sound of her mind screaming, consumed with a whirlwind of emotions and ideas, a knot of thoughts that won't ever be heard. No ears will ever hear her feelings or fears, yet the silence was deafening. Thoughts tore her up, ate her alive. What she felt inside was nothing to hide, but she thought it would subside if she ignored it long enough. She thought she was strong enough. She lied. Lying there in the silence, all she could think about was how she couldn't think. Her imagination turned into strangulation until she was silent. The silence was deafening. So she lied on her bed and tried to let someone in her head, but all they heard was silence. It echoed back at her. If silent and listen were made up of the same shattered pieces, she might have believed she hadn't spoken at all. But her hurricane thoughts were much too loud for her to be hearing them alone, and she kept speaking because she was much too alive to forget the voices on the outside of her head too. She put silence to bed. She had finally found a voice loud enough for others to hear, and her garbled radio mind became a little less deafening. And finally, we have a poem with some fantastic imagery in here, which reminds me of London. And I've been a little homesick this week, so that's kind of why I wanted to read this one. It's called Under the Streetlights. This is a ghost town. The streets have never been so empty, so achingly lonely, so quiet. This was a busy town, a city that works, always bustling with people, car lights, voices, but it's all gone now. I walk alone tonight. I shiver, the air around me frigid. Faint steps, the only sound for miles. The lonely city night surrounds me, remind me painstakingly of better times. I am a magpie for memories. I pick them up, clutch them tightly, sort them into little pieces, but there's always too many, and I am never strong enough. I remember hazy summer light, the embers of campfire, the brilliant reds of autumn, leaf piles in the park. I remember snow-tipped grass, drinking mugs of hot cocoa, the bright blooms of spring flowers, and being surrounded in beauty. Where is it all gone? Where is the beauty in this? The corpses laying on the street, the discord, the hatred, the virus driving people mad, being left all alone. The magpie in me crumbles. This city night is black and cold. lone streetlights lighting up the way. The pale moonlight wraps around me, holds me tight in its quiet grip. I hear a wisp of laughter, a beautiful sound, and I pause, glancing around. But it's just me, alone on the asphalt, where I'll always watch the streetlights die. So that's where I'm going to end this video. I seriously wish I could have read out so many more of your poems. I wish I could have talked about so many more on video, but, you know, we don't want to be here for 12 hours again. But what I want you all to know is that I am so impressed with every single one of you who sent me a poem, and I'm so thankful you did. And it's amazing. I cannot thank you enough for being a part of this and sharing your work with me, sharing a part of yourselves with me. It was an absolute pleasure to read all of your work, and thank you. That's all I have to say, thank you. The thing is, it has given me an idea because I want us to all be able to discuss and interact a little bit more over these poems, and so that's what I want to do with this month and hopefully the coming months as well. So last month I asked for you to submit your poems by email, and then I was gonna I did, I put them into this document thing, and I was starting to post them to Instagram, but honestly it was just taking way too much time, and I felt like I was spending all my time just like copying and pasting poems and all this stuff rather than doing anything useful, and it took a lot of time away from me when I could be working on like actual videos and content for you guys. But I still want you guys to be able to share your poems publicly so we can all chat about them. So I thought, what about a forum? Are they still a thing? Turns out they're still a thing. I don't know if people still use them, but we are going to. So I have now added a Fresh Poets Society forum to my website. You can register on there. You can register using a username or your real name, whatever you want. There's no pressure. You can still remain anonymous if you want. Just submit under like a random username or whatever. All the back-end signing in stuff is handled by WordPress, so that isn't anything really to do with me, but I will be kind of like looking at the forums in terms of content and trying to manage that and keep on top of it all. Every month I will be creating a new kind of forum area with that month's theme, and then I'll be looking through that forum. I'll read all the submissions, I'll select some interesting ones to talk about in a video, and I'll also be on there chatting away with you guys and sharing my thoughts and stuff like that. And I thoroughly encourage you all to go ahead, do the same thing as well. There's some rules on there if you want to check it out. But for now, yeah, that's basically where I'm going to end this. Go submit your poems now for next month's theme, which is something I think we could all do with a little bit of at the moment, and that is kindness. Take this however you want. Again, be as literal or as abstract if you want, but what does kindness mean to you? What does it make you think of? How are you inspired by kindness? That's what I want you to submit poems for next month. Remember, it can be an older poem or it can be something new that you've written for this. As long as it's original work, I don't mind. If you also want to kind of like get involved with more Fresh Poets Society stuff, I do have some merch over on my merch store with the like Fresh Poets Society like badge kind of design that I've made. There's like t-shirts, hoodies, some stickers as well. I love the design. I think it's great. There's been some people asking for different coloured versions, which I might do. So I'm thinking of doing like a grayscale one and a bluish one as well. If there's any other colours, or maybe yellow. I love yellow. I really like yellow. And if there's anything else you want in terms of like colours or design, let me know down in the comments below. But for now, yeah, thank you to everyone who submitted. Thank you to everyone who is going to submit for this month. Please head over to my website now, which is racheloates.me. The forums are on there and I will link it below. I'm probably rambling now. I'm not very good at all this admin stuff. I'm very unorganised. I'm going to end this. It's very long. I love you guys so much. I'll see you again soon. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Bye.